On Father's Day, my daughter gave her father-in-law a luxury cruise package, but for me, just a cheap lottery ticket. She laughed until that ticket changed everything. That single moment changed the course of my life forever. But before I take you deeper into my story, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. My name is Daniel Warren. I'm 62 years old, a retired mechanic, and for most of my life, I considered myself a simple man. I wasn't rich, I didn't own yachts or mansions, and I certainly didn't live the kind of flashy lifestyle my daughter admired in her father-in-law. What I did have was honesty, hard work, and decades of sacrifice poured into raising her. But as the years went on, I started to feel invisible in her eyes. When she married into a wealthy family, I thought maybe she'd find balance between the man who raised her and the one who could provide her with lavish vacations and expensive jewelry. Instead, I became a shadow, a placeholder at family gatherings, someone she tolerated rather than cherished. The tension reached its peak on Father's Day. I arrived at my daughter Emily's house that morning with a small bouquet of flowers and a card. It was something I had always done. No matter how old she became, I wanted her to know she would always be my little girl. She greeted me politely, though without the warmth she once had as a child. Inside, the living room was full of her husband's relatives, including his father, a man named Charles, who carried himself with the kind of arrogance only extreme wealth can buy. Charles was always the center of attention. He wore designer suits, gold cufflinks, and he had the kind of deep laugh that made everyone else in the room feel smaller. I sat quietly, watching the family exchange gifts. Emily handed Charles a sleek black envelope. He opened it with exaggerated grace, then pulled out a glossy cruise brochure. A 2-week Mediterranean cruise. Charles announced proudly, "Emily, you've outdone yourself." Everyone clapped and cheered. Charles wrapped his arms around my daughter, and she beamed at him as though she had just given her true father the gift. I smiled faintly, trying to hide the sting in my chest. And Emily turned to me. "Dad, I didn't forget you," she said, almost as an afterthought. She handed me a small white envelope. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single lottery ticket. She chuckled. "Who knows? Maybe you'll get lucky. It could be fun." The room erupted in polite laughter, but not the kind that warmed her heart. It was mocking, dismissive. I felt my face burn as Charles leaned back in his leather chair and smirked. "Now, that's a fitting gift," he said. "A chance, not a guarantee." Everyone laughed again. I forced a smile, but inside, I was breaking. My daughter had just compared my worth to a scratch-off ticket. The party moved on quickly, and I stayed quiet, invisible again. Later that evening, I went home to my modest little apartment. I sat at the kitchen table with the ticket in front of me. I should have thrown it away, but something inside urged me to scratch it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was desperation. I grabbed a coin and started scratching off the numbers. One by one, they lined up. My heart began to race. "No, this can't be," I whispered. I rubbed my eyes, checked again, then triple-checked the numbers against the winning combination listed. I had just won $100 million. For a moment, the room spun. I sat there frozen, staring at the ticket in disbelief. The laughter of that morning echoed in my ears. Emily's smirk, Charles's arrogance. And now this little slip of paper had turned the tables in a way none of them could have imagined. But even as the reality of the win began to sink in, so did something darker. The memory of being dismissed, ridiculed, treated like less than a father. This wasn't just a win. This was fate handing me justice. And I knew things would never be the same again. Winning $100 million should have felt like pure joy. But instead, my heart was heavy. I sat in silence, the golden ticket in my hand trembling as though it carried the weight of my entire life. Shock, disbelief, gratitude, bitterness, all those emotions collided inside me like crashing waves. My daughter's mocking voice echoed. In my mind, "Dad, maybe you'll get lucky." And I had. But her words weren't spoken with love or hope. They were laced with condescension. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the peeling paint on my kitchen walls. For years, I had worked double shifts as a mechanic, scraping by so Emily could have everything she needed: braces, dance classes, college tuition. I had sold my truck once just to cover her first semester's fees. She never knew that. She never saw the nights I fell asleep on the garage floor, oil-stained hands clasped together in prayer for her future. And now, she thought of me as a man deserving of nothing more than a joke gift. The ticket wasn't just money. It was validation. But it was also a test. What would I do with it? Would I flaunt it like Charles did his wealth? Would I let it poison my heart the way arrogance had poisoned my daughter's? Or would I use it to reclaim my dignity? I didn't have the answers yet. The next morning, I went to the state lottery office. The process was surreal. Identification checks, verification, signatures, cameras flashing. When the official finally shook my hand and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Warren. You are now the winner of $100 million." I felt my knees weaken. They offered me two options: lump sum or annual payments. One chose the lump sum, about $60 million after taxes. It was more money than I could even comprehend, but with it came risk. I knew once Emily found out, her attitude would change. She would remember suddenly that I was her father, that she loved me. Charles and my son-in-law, Ethan, would circle, like sharks smelling blood in the water. And I was right. News travels fast. Within a week, Emily called me. "Dad," she said sweetly, her tone syrupy in a way I hadn't heard since she was a teenager asking for money. "I heard the news. Oh my God, congratulations. Isn't this amazing?" I paused, letting the silence stretch. "You didn't sound too excited when you gave me that ticket." She laughed nervously. "Oh, Dad, I was just teasing. You know how I am. But seriously, this is wonderful. We should celebrate. Why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow?" I agreed, but not because I wanted to celebrate. I wanted to see their true faces when greed replaced arrogance. The next evening, I walked into her house. The atmosphere was different this time. Emily rushed to hug me at the door, something she hadn't done in years. Ethan shook my hand firmly, his smile a little too wide. And Charles gave me a look that said he saw me differently now. Over dinner, the questions began. "So, Dad," Emily said casually, "have you thought about what you're going to do with all that money? I mean, you don't need that much at your age." Ethan chimed in. "You could invest in our business, maybe. It would secure Emily's future, too." Charles leaned forward, his voice dripping with confidence. "Or perhaps you'd like some guidance. Managing a fortune isn't easy. I could help oversee it, make sure it doesn't go to waste." I listened, my face calm, but inside, my heart ached. These weren't the voices of love or celebration. They were the voices of entitlement. My daughter didn't see me as a father anymore. She saw me as a wallet. I put down my fork slowly. "Interesting ideas. But tell me, Emily, when you gave Charles that cruise package and me a lottery ticket, what did you really think of me in that moment?" Her face paled. "Dad, it was just a joke." "No," I said firmly. "It was? How you see me? Disposable. A man who sacrificed his whole life for you, reduced to a scratch-off card while another man gets all your respect." The table went silent. Charles cleared his throat. "Let's not dwell on the past. What matters now is the future. And with your wealth, Daniel, we could all benefit." I stood up. "I'll think about it. But I already knew I wasn't going to let them bleed me dry. That night, I called a lawyer, a man named Richard Palmer, who had handled estates for wealthy clients before. When I explained my situation, he listened carefully, then said, "Mr. Warren, you need to protect yourself immediately. Family greed can be more dangerous than strangers. Let's set up a trust and legal safeguards before you announce anything publicly." Over the next few weeks, Richard helped me create a fortress around my fortune. We established a trust fund under my control, with clear stipulations about inheritance. If Emily or her husband attempted to manipulate or pressure me, they would risk losing access to anything. Charles? He wasn't even mentioned. Meanwhile, Emily's calls became more frequent. She invited me to lunches, family outings, even hinted at moving me into her home so she could take care of me. But I wasn't blind. Every smile was calculated, every hug rehearsed. That one evening, she came right out with it. "Dad," I was thinking, "since you've always wanted to see me happy, maybe you could gift us a down payment for a bigger house. You know, so Ethan and I can expand the family." It would mean so much to me. I looked at her long and hard. "Emily, do you even remember what I gave up to pay for your first house? The years of my life I spent making sure you had everything? And now you ask for more, not out of love, but out of greed." She froze, then forced a smile. "You're wrong. This is about family." But I could see it in her eyes. It wasn't about family. It was about money, Dot, and that's when I decided I would wait. I would let the greed rise to the surface, let it consume them. And then, when the time was right, I would reveal the truth, that the power was mine, and they couldn't touch a single dollar unless I allowed it. The sweetest revenge is patience. And I was ready to play the long game. The weeks that followed felt like a game of chess. Every move Emily, Ethan, and Charles made was predictable. Phone calls laced with fake affection, sudden invitations to family gatherings, constant suggestions about how I should enjoy my money. But I wasn't the same man they thought. They could mock. I wasn't the humble, silent father sitting in the corner, invisible while Charles took the spotlight. I had a lawyer, a plan, and for the first time in my life, power. And I was ready to use it, Doc. It happened one Sunday afternoon. Emily invited me over for what she called a family meeting. When I arrived, Charles was already sitting. At the head of the table, Ethan by his side, and Emily standing proudly behind him. The sight made my blood run cold. It wasn't a family meeting. It was an ambush. Emily gestured for me to sit. "Dad, we've been talking. We think it's time you start making some big decisions with your money. At your age, you don't need all that stress. Charles has agreed to oversee your finances. He's experienced, smart, and can make sure your wealth doesn't go to waste." I raised an eyebrow. "So you want me to hand over my winnings to Charles?" Charles cleared his throat confidently. "Not hand over, Daniel. Think of it as delegating. I've managed wealth all my life. You're new to this. I can protect your assets, invest wisely, and guarantee your family's future." Ethan chimed in. "It makes sense, Dad. Why risk it when Charles can secure everything?" I leaned back, studying their faces. Emily wasn't even hiding it anymore. Her eyes gleamed with greed, her smile forced but hungry. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel weak. I felt strong. "Interesting," I said slowly. "But let me tell you what I've decided." I pulled out a folder from my bag and placed it on the table. Inside were the documents my lawyer had prepared. I've already taken steps to protect my fortune. The money isn't in my personal account anymore. It's in a trust, locked by legal safeguards. No one can touch a dime unless I say so. Their faces fell. Emily's smile vanished. Ethan's jaw tightened. And Charles, for once, looked speechless. You? You did what?" Emily stammered. I protected myself, I said firmly, because I knew this day would come. I knew. The moment you heard about the money, you wouldn't see me as your father anymore. You'd see me as a bank. And I refused to be used. Charles leaned forward, his voice rising. This is foolish, Daniel. Do you even know how to handle that kind of money? Without proper management, you'll lose it all. I stared him dead in the eye. I may lose money, but I won't lose my dignity. Not again. Emily's face turned red. Dad, how could you? After everything I've done for you, I cut her off. Everything you've done for me? Emily, I raised you alone. I worked myself to the bone so you could have the life you wanted. And when Father's Day came, you gave me a ticket as a joke while giving Charles luxury. Do you remember how you laughed at me that day? Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of anger. You're being selfish, she spat. This money could help us all. No, Emily, I said quietly. This money revealed who you really are. And that's the greatest gift of all. After that day, Emily's calls slowed. The fake affection turned into bitterness. Ethan stopped, pretending altogether. And Charles, well, he avoided me entirely. But I didn't feel alone. For the first time in decades, I felt in control. I worked with my lawyer to set up scholarships for underprivileged kids. I funded repairs for the old community center where Emily used to dance as a little girl. I even bought back the truck I once sold for her tuition, not because I needed it, but because it reminded me of the sacrifices I had made, sacrifices she had forgotten. The money didn't change me. It changed the way others saw me. And that was the true heartbreak. One evening, as I sat in my quiet home, I whispered to myself, respect should never come with a price tag. It should be given freely. And I realized I hadn't just won the lottery. I had won something greater. I had won back my dignity, God. So if you're listening to my story, remember this. It's not money that defines your worth. It's the respect and love you give, and the respect and love you deserve in return. That my daughter thought a cruise gift was better than a lottery ticket. She thought her father-in-law was better than her own father. But in the end, I proved that true worth isn't measured by wealth or status. It's measured by heart. And I will never let anyone make me feel small again. If you've ever believed respect matters more than money, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.